Hi everybody and welcome to the Heel Heat Review Show. My name is George Coles. This is my tag team partner Jim Brunzell.
Thanks, B. Brian Blair. My name's Gary Rhodes, the voice of the voiceless.
Not the voice of the voiceless.
I give Paul a night off.
Anyway, last time we did a review, we gave you guys the option of what you want us to see us review: WrestleMania 18 or WrestleMania 3. Survey says
WrestleMania 3.
probably the biggest wrestling event ever. Um, Highlighted by events we're going to talk about here in a second. First thing we want to talk about, most of the matches on the show are about 5 minutes or less, with 3 minutes being over, three matches being over that. So it still holds up pretty well, even though it's a 25-year-old show.
Oh yeah, and we watched it, because we've seen this over and over and over before. To add something to it, we watched the disc 2, which has the pop-up version of
If you buy the special edition version, which you could get on Amazon, I got it off of Amazon for $5 probably about a year ago, and it's probably even cheaper now. It comes with like a pop-up video version of it. It was put out at the 20th anniversary, which would have been about WrestleMania 23, about 2007. So it's definitely worth a buy, especially if you're someone who wants to know the history and you've heard of this event over and over again. But going right into it, we had the first match of the night was a tag match. Don Morocco and Cowboy Bob Orton, Randy Orton's father, versus Tom Zink and Rick Martel, the Can-Am Connection.
Yeah, it's a solid match, for what it was back then, the amount of workers are in it.
And then you had this was before Martel would go on to be the model and have a more successful run. He was a low-level tag team with Tom Zink, and then he ended up teaming with Tito Santana, becoming Strikeforce.
And who was the guy he was with beforehand in WWE back in the 70s?
Gurria.
Tony Gurria, that's right. They actually were two-time tag champions then.
In the WWF.
Yeah.
And Martel and Zink went over. Solid match, good opener for the show. Nice little fast pace going on there. I liked it. It was decent. Then we got the next match of the night was the Full Nelson Challenge match, which was Hercules Hernandez versus Billy Jerk Haynes.
Yeah. Solid match, for what it was. Two of the guys back then that were actually monsters of their day. You're talking about two guys that are 270 or 275, and that area back then was pretty impressive with the build they had. They didn't have a beer gut at being 270. They weren't like a Dusty Rhodes. These guys were cut slap the hell up.
Now the only thing I didn't like, this was one of the matches that got a longer time frame. I think it's the third longest match on the show.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of rest hold periods in it. It was one of the slower paced matches. But for the time, it's 1987 that this came out, that happened a lot, to be honest with you. So I'm looking at it at 2012 eyes at a 1987 match. If I remember right at the time, I didn't think nothing bad of it. I didn't like the match. I didn't particularly care for either participant. I wasn't a fan or hate either one of them, to be honest with you.
Well, the best part of the match was Bobby was in the corner.
Yeah,
Bobby
exactly. But it was a decent match. Ended up in a draw. Then we had the special attraction match: King Kong Bundy, Little Tokyo, Lord Littlebrook versus Hillbilly Jim, Little Beaver, and Haiti Kid. The two midgets on each side. Bundy ends up squashing one of the midgets, and all the midgets turn on Bundy.
Bundy, gets disqualified. He takes off on his own. The midgets stay in the ring with Hillbilly Jim and celebrate.
That basically this is your you get them every year now with Santino and guys of that matter, where it's the comedy match of the night, basically.
Yeah, and the thing is, the WrestleMania before this, Bundy was going for the WWE Championship then.
And then he sunk way down to the comedy relief.
Exactly, and the thing is, I didn't really recognize. Because I remember Hillbilly Jim when I was older, and he wasn't in shape. He was in damn good shape back then.
Yeah, Hillbilly Jim was a monster, and you got to remember he's a guy that I think Hulk Hogan personally brought into the WWE. And, he worked with Hogan. He had a tremendous build, mostly hid by he wore the overalls all the time. But, decent comedy match. At the time, it was very revolutionary, very taboo what they did. So, it went over for what it was.
The next we had the match for the kingship. It's Harley Race versus Junkyard Dog. Harley Race is already the king. Junkyard Dog was challenging for the crown.
Yeah. And this was their way to pay respect to Harley Race for all he accomplished outside of the WWF without saying he's the 8-time NWA champion, which they didn't bring up other shows at that point.
No.
At all. It was never mentioned where the guys came from.
No. And it was for what it was a good match. And then Harley ends up going over with the belly to belly.
Yeah, Harley ends up winning, and then JYD gets his revenge after the match and leaves with the cape on.
Didn't get the crown though.
No.
And he had to bow.
First he did a curtsy. Another match with Heenan in the corner. Heenan's in the corner of half the guys on the match, on the card, I mean. And it was really, really a solid match. The only thing I'm sad about really is if you get to watch this and this is the only Harley Race match you see, it's a little bit disappointing. Harley Race at his time was a tremendous worker.
Oh, he's a beast.
Look up Starrcade 1983, Harley Race versus Ric Flair, one of my all-time favorite matches. It's worked so well. The emotion that they put into that match is just tremendous.
And if you look at some of his older stuff, if you get a chance to find some on the YouTube, he's had better matches than that one. I mean, it was an awesome match because of the story behind it, but he was more, better in his prime than him. And right when he faced Flair, he was on the outskirts of his prime. I mean, let's face it, and he was handing the reins over to Flair.
And the reason I think I like it so much is the story the two guys told in the ring. It was a tremendous match, don't get me wrong, but the story they told in that match I thought was tremendous. I think Harley Race, other than Harley Race, Triple H is one of those guys that it's not necessarily what they do, it's how they do it.
Oh, yeah.
It's, Harley Race doesn't have the flashiest moves ever. He never has, but the way he did them meant so much to them.
Oh, yeah.
It told the story perfectly. He was a wonderful storyteller.
In his prime, he was probably the best storyteller of his day. Yeah. Plus, I mean, this guy legitimately got stabbed, shot.
Piss thrown on him,
exactly.
Shit thrown on him.
This was back in the day when you were a heel. You had to be a tough guy. You couldn't just be some punk kid, sitting there, kind of like the Miz was at first. You couldn't be. That wouldn't have flew back in the day. He would have quit. Yeah. The first time someone dropped piss on him or someone pulled a knife on him, he was done.
Then we had, after that, we had the Rougeau brothers versus the Dream Team, Greg the Hammer Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. They had Dino Bravo and Johnny V in their corner, and Bravo ends up cheating to help the Dream Team win. Beefcake doesn't like it. They leave without Beefcake, foreshadowing the face turn of Beefcake a little bit later in the show.
And the birth of the bar.
It was what it was. The Rougeaus are a really solid team. Valentine's a really solid worker. Beefcake had his moments where he was good. Most of the time, he was too gimmicky for my liking.
Yes.
But 3 of the 4 guys in there were solid. I don't think the match got quite enough time for it to be a really decent match. Again, a lot of these matches are under 5 minutes, under 6-7 minutes. So this one, another short match that could have got a little bit longer to build. But I understand why they did that. They wanted to get as many people as they could on the pay-per-view to give them the big payday.
And then, the next match is going to be Adrian Adonis versus Roddy Piper in his retirement match.
Jesus Christ. How many retirements has this guy had at this point? Who has more, him or Funk?
Oh, I'm about to say Terry Funk has more.
I don't know. It's got to be close.
Oh, I don't know. I still think Funk's got a lot more.
And, Piper was retiring to go shoot They Live, which is a classic movie John Carpenter directed.
If you haven't seen it, watch it. Maybe one day we'll do reviews of wrestlers that are in regular movies. And, that would have to be the one that we do review because it was such an awesome movie.
You'd rather do that than Ready to Rumble?
I don't know.
With John Cena in it?
For the quarter of a second that John Cena's in it, yeah. God.
Or 12 rounds.
But anyways, in this match, it culminates at the end of it where Piper gets Adonis to sleep with a sleeper hold, and then Beefcake runs out and becomes the barber.
And shaves Adrian Adonis' head. Another match, another guy, Adrian Adonis, this was towards the end of his run. I think he ended up dying in a car accident a year later.
Something like that.
But if you look up his stuff in the AWA, he was a tremendous worker as well. This match doesn't really show that. He had let himself go. He is way out of shape. I think he's pushing about 375.
Oh, yeah.
if not more. And
he can still move, but
he still move. He just wasn't what he was. At a time, him and Jesse Ventura were one of the best tag teams in the world.
Oh yeah, they were on fire. One of the best heel tag teams. I think they were like Edge and Christian before there was an Edge and Christian. Any cocky heel tag team, they need to thank them too.
And then you got the next match was, I thought it was a little bit of a clusterfuck and didn't have to be.
Yeah.
Hart Foundation and Danny Davis versus British Bulldog and Tito Santana. Now, a little bit backstory as to why Danny Davis and Tito Santana are in instead of just a straight tag match. Danny Davis was a referee who ended up screwing Tito Santana against Randy Savage when Savage won the Intercontinental title, and then also screwed the British Bulldogs for the Hart Foundation to win the tag team titles, and then ended up being Danny Davis got suspended as a referee for life plus 10 years was what Tunney said at the point.
Yeah.
But he was probably the worst worker of the match. They put him in there just like again to fit more people in and get more people payday.
Mm-hmm.
I would have much rather seen a Bulldogs versus Hart Foundation match. 4 tremendous workers.
You're at the biggest show of the year. That's the match people want to see.
But it worked for the storyline.
Yeah.
And it got Tito Santana on the show, which he, again, another tremendous worker they had there.
Gave him a paycheck.
And then, it ended up with the Hart Foundation and Danny Davis winning. An odd number of heels for the time went over on this show.
That's the thing that everybody always blamed Vince for. At WrestleMania, all the faces win. This one here, a majority of the matches were won by heels.
Yeah. I mean, there was a solid heels won a lot of the matches on here, and it was refreshing watching it back because honestly, I didn't remember the finish of all these matches. A lot of these matches I don't really care about.
Well, we watched them all for you guys.
Yeah, but it was a great show, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. Then before we go on into the rest of the show, we invented a drinking game while we were watching it, and we think you guys, if you do buy this DVD, take it at home. Do the drinking game with us. Now, it's a little bit morbid, so if this offends you, fuck you. Basically, it's the death count drinking game. Every time you see a dead wrestler or somebody else on the show, take a drink.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee by the time you get to that match, you're going to be piss fucking drunk.
Oh, of course.
If you look through it, and we marked it off, Gorilla Monsoon, his son Joey Morella, Hercules Hernandez, Little Beaver, Little Tokyo, Elizabeth, Macho Man, Junkyard Dog, Fabulous Moolah, Dina Bravo, Adrian Adonis, Davey Boy Smith, Jack Tunney, Andre the Giant, and Arnold Skaaland. All them guys were dead, and probably some of the other refs that we just don't know their names of.
Yeah, some of them were pretty old back then, so I'm sure they probably are, but...
And maybe even the Federettes, because who knows who the hell the Federettes were.
Who cares?
They're probably just rats from that town.
Hey, it's mine, brother. No, Hogan or Savage was probably still Elizabeth's then.
And then, so try that drinking game out if you do get it. Let us know how it goes for you guys. Don't blame us if you get alcohol poisoning.
I'm telling you. The next match was the Natural Butch Reed versus Coco Beware.
And this was before Butch Reed was in Doom with Ron Simmons.
And one thing me and George were talking about during this match is that Coco was a great worker elsewhere.
Yeah.
And he really was just pretty much a face jobber. Lower card. I mean, I wouldn't say a jobber because people did jobs to him, but he was right there. I mean, if you're facing him, he was
a guy that he was a stepping stool on the ladder. Like if you were going to go for an Intercontinental run, you beat Coco first.
Yeah.
But,
but you look at this way too. I mean, you look at some of the people that they put with Coco, and seen what happened to their careers. I mean, even with Owen Hart, they were at high energy for a little bit, and they did pretty well.
It was a decent match. Butch Reed got the win, and at the end, Coco chased after Slick and ripped his shirt off, which at the time...
Oh, actually, Santana came out and ripped his shirt off.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And they didn't give no backstory on it during the pay-per-view. I don't remember the gimmick as to why Santino, whatever. Tito Santana, I don't remember the backstory as to why he had beef with Slick at the time. I remember more of Santana having beef with Heenan's guys.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had, after that match, we had probably the greatest wrestling match of all time. Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat. go out there and absolutely put on a clinic that every wrestling fan should watch at some time in their life. If you're a wrestling fan and you haven't watched this match, turn our video off right now, go find it and watch it. Because you cannot call yourself a wrestling fan without watching this match.
To be honest with you, if this isn't your top match, this will be the top 5 or 10 matches you'll ever watch. There's been some good matches since. And to me, this match still stands the time. You know what I'm saying? It still, if this was on TV, I would watch this match.
Yeah.
You know,
and they're like, there's going to be other matches. Some people have personal preferences. Like he said, if this isn't in your top 5, you have no business calling yourself a wrestling fan.
Because, and I'm not a Steamboat fan at all. I mean, I don't dislike him, but he's never been heel, so I can't like him. You know, I mean, I've always liked the bad guys. Savage, great heel, and great worker. And I've heard, you know, other wrestlers were talking about this match about Savage. He works these matches, and you know, he gets with whoever he's working with, and they work it for God knows how long until they makes it perfect. He's a perfectionist. If you don't believe that, look at his WrestleMania 7 against
the Ultimate
Warrior. He made
which is the absolute best Ultimate Warrior match ever.
Exactly. It's one of Savage's greatest because Savage takes the time to work with his opponents.
And his feud with DDP. He's the guy that put DDP on the map, basically.
Oh yeah, I watched an interview with DDP, and he says there's one man. I mean, he's been in the business a while before, but there's one man that made him solid, and he said that was Macho Man Randy Savage. He said actually after that match, he called. It's starting to get off the story of this, but it's kind of, you know, I like Savage, and called Savage up on Thanksgiving and thanked him for everything he's done for him and thanked him for that match. Exactly. He said the next time they seen each other for a show, you know, Savage just went and gave him a big hug and called his dad and asked his dad if anybody ever did that for him. You know, I mean, that just shows you what kind of guy DDP it was and what kind of trained guy Savage is.
And the right guy went over for the time. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat had culminated a long feud that was over a year long at that point, which most of these feuds had a really long build-up. The main event's the only one that only had about a 2-month build-up. Most of them build up 8 months, 6 months, a year, because there was only one pay-per-view at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they built for the house shows. Tremendous match, one of the best ever. In my opinion, the best ever. Then you got the next match after that was Jake the Snake Roberts versus the Honky Tonk Man. And this was Jake's face turn. Jake had been a heel, and they were bringing him out as a face because Honky Tonk attacked him
with a real guitar by accident.
Yeah, just not a gimmick guitar. He hit him in the head with a real guitar, as per the backstory. Decent match. Jake's a tremendous in-ring worker. Honky Tonk Man doesn't get the credit that he deserves as a worker.
Yeah,
I mean
he grew up in the Memphis territories, and back then it meant something. You know,
and you had to be a good worker to wrestle there. I mean, even guys like the Moondogs that came out of there were tremendous workers. But it was a good match. A little bit, if you're watching it, the only thing I don't like the placing there, because you get such a letdown from nothing could really follow Macho versus Steamboat.
No.
And any other match that came on after that, if you watch this match on its own standalone, you love it. But you get a little bit of letdown because of the tremendous match that happens before it.
And Vince was smart about that, because he put a couple matches in between that and the main event.
Yeah.
To build up.
Then you had the weirdly placed match, Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov versus the Killer Bees, that ended up in a DQ match because Hacksaw came in and hit Sheik with a 2x4.
Yep.
But it was a weirdly placed match. I think it should have went a little bit lower in the card. They could have placed Harley Race versus Junkyard Dog up here. They could have placed Adonis versus Piper up here.
Well, I think the reason they did that is because the next match is going to be the championship match, and they just wanted to, get the crowd calmed down from seeing such a great match earlier with the Macho Steamboat match. Because if they would have put that one right after, people would have started leaving beforehand. I'm sorry, it was a big match, but a real wrestling fan would be like, okay, well, I'm spent. My emotions are done.
Then we did have the main event, the biggest main event in the history of wrestling, bar none. It can't be argued. Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan at the height of Hulkamania. Andre the Giant was towards the end of his career and putting over the younger guy. At this point, Hogan was champion, about 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah, something about that.
Right about that. I mean,
And the thing is with this, like we were talking earlier, only had a couple months build up, and you filled the Pontiac Silverdome with it.
Yeah.
And it's really the greatest match of all time. Not work wise, but it was the biggest build up for 2 months.
It's the biggest event of all time.
Yeah. I mean, you take the Rock and Cena, which we went and saw.
Yeah.
And they built that for over a year, and it still had nothing on this.
I mean, it was the biggest event. It was the right match at the right time. Absolutely perfect. The match itself was decent, fair at best. Andre was in so much pain at this point that he could barely walk even, let alone wrestle a match.
And that's why he was so sweaty.
Yeah, because he's sweating. If you watch the old Andre interviews, he's sweating profusely because it hurts him to stand up.
Yeah, when he stands up straight, it hurt him.
Yeah.
And Bobby Heenan was in the corner too, as well. We forgot to mention that.
And it was a tremendous event. Not so much a tremendous match. I'm a Hogan detractor. You guys have seen me detract, from him, but it was absolutely right that he went over in this match and built Hulkamania to the level where it eventually became the biggest thing.
He was the young guy, and you're supposed to help build the young guys up. And speaking of that, we're going to go to our next choice of DVDs. And
well, before we do that, what would you give this overall?
The pay-per-view,
Yeah.
out of 4
out of 5.
4 out of 5.
I'd give it a 4 out of 5. A solid 4, definitely worth buying, especially since you can find it on the cheap. It's for the historical significance alone, it's well worth it. Now, the next thing we want to do,
like I was saying earlier, is a guy that built his career on building after he got older, building other guys, would be Ric Flair.
and this is our options. For the next video, let us know what we think. We got Nature Boy Ric Flair, the definitive collection, which is a little bit different than the anthology collection. There's a white one and a blue one. This is a blue one.
And then the other one, talking about Bobby Heenan earlier, the world's greatest wrestling managers.
Let us know what you think of it. If you want to do this, let us know. Put it in our comments down where?
Down there.
Put it on Facebook. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know which one you want to see us review next. And basically, that's what we have. This has been the Heel Heat review of WrestleMania 3. I'm George Coles.
I'm Gary Rhodes.
And we'll see you at the next review.